Good evening, everyone. Welcome to this live webinar organised by Jamaica Diaspora UK, also known as JD UK. We'll share more about JD UK in a few minutes. My name is Jennifer Blake and I'm the moderator for this live webinar tonight. I'm also a volunteer as a specialist advisor and member of the board of JD UK. Welcome to our panelists and to those watching on Facebook and YouTube. We're glad that you could join us, but more than that, this live webinar is organised for you. This evening has happened as a result of a strongly worded and Black community supported letter and campaign. The campaign resulted in conversation and dialogue with the Commonwealth Games 2022 Board and Organising Committee about the importance of explicit, i.e. visible, evidence of Black community representation, inclusion and engagement within the 22 Commonwealth Games Board and Committees. So the dialogue and discussion continues this evening, and our panellist Tony Kelly will say more about the campaign as a leader of the campaign, a key leader of the campaign. I know that we are all aware, but for clarity, context, and to restate the importance of tonight's discussion, I'd like to remind us all that the 2022 Commonwealth Games, commonly known as Birmingham 2022, is an international multi-sport event for members of the Commonwealth, and it runs between the 28th of July and the 8th of August. But that's enough from me because we have with us our panellist who can say a little bit more and give more of an introduction and a context to the Commonwealth Games. So without further ado, and before we start the full panel discussion and the webinar tonight, I'd like to hand over to Ian Reid, who can say a little bit more of a context around the Commonwealth Games. Ian, can you come in at this point?
Thank you, Jennifer, and good evening, everybody watching from home. I'm delighted to be here tonight with colleagues from JD UK, and hopefully we can address a number of your concerns and have a positive discussion this evening. But as Jennifer said, just a little introduction from me initially about what is coming to the West Midlands in the summer of 2022. So Commonwealth Games will probably be the biggest event ever to come to the West Midlands. It will take place between 28th of July and 8th of August in 2022, but we'll have a cultural programme that shoulders that period as well. 72 competing nations will take part from every corner of the Commonwealth. We will have 19 sports as part of the programme, and that will involve somewhere in the region of over 1 million tickets available for sport, potentially up to 2.5 million people engaging with the cultural programme, and history would tell us potentially over 1 billion viewers on television watching that showcase in the West Midlands. So a huge opportunity. One of the key focuses for us as an event and an organising committee, in which will be part of tonight's discussion, will be around the numerous opportunities that the Games will also bring, and that's everything from job opportunities, volunteering opportunities, contractual opportunities, cultural opportunities, ceremonies opportunities, and I could go on, but we'll talk about more about that later this evening. So thank you, Jennifer.
Okay, thank you very much, Ian. Now, there are 639 days to go before the start of the Commonwealth Games, and I consider that tonight, this live webinar is a significant milestone to that countdown. That's the level of importance that I'm putting to this. Before we move on, as Ian outlined, I'd like to just remind people or make you aware of the purpose and our agenda for this evening. So we'll start off, although Reid has already spoken, we'll give you more of an introduction as to Ian's role and why he's here. So we'll do some introductions to everyone on the panel, just for a couple of minutes. We'll have an update from Tony Kelly, who's the Secretary of JD UK West Midlands and has also been a key campaigner for where we are tonight. I'd then like to invite Ian Reid to come back to talk about what improvements have been made as a result of the campaign that has taken place. And that will be for about 10 minutes. I'd also like Ian, as he has already stated, to highlight some of the opportunities for business and for people, for communities and for jobs that may be around as a result of the enormous opportunities that the Games actually present, not just to the West Midlands, but to the whole country. I think that there is some important information about the Cultural Festival, which I'm keen to know more about, and hopefully Ian again will talk about that. And then importantly, over to you, 25 minutes where you have an opportunity to ask questions of anyone on the panel. Before we kick off, because obviously what we have now is technology and this Zoom meeting, just a few ground rules to help things go really, really well. I'd like to remind panelists to stick to the time that I give you, and I'm happy to remind you when you're coming to an end, and I want you to basically finish so that we can move on, because I think it's important that we stick to the time that we've committed to. If it becomes clear towards the end of the evening that we need more time, I'm sure that a discussion could be had where we maybe offer another event, and I think that would be really important. Okay, so I'd like now to invite the panelists to do a short 2-minute introduction about themselves. And as Ian has already spoken, I'd like to offer you the opportunity first, Ian. So Ian Reid, can you introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, I'm Ian Reid, so I'm the Chief Executive Officer of the Organising Committee for Birmingham 2022. My background is you can probably tell from the accent, a Scottish, and I'm actually a chartered accountant. My history and events, I was the Chief Financial Officer for when the Commonwealth Games came to Glasgow in 2014, and worked on that project for 7 years, one of the first employees and the last person out the door, and have a huge passion for these events and what they can do in terms of engaging the community and changing cities and regions. So yeah, and I've been working in this role, Jennifer, for just over 2 years now, and have hopefully a couple of years to go until we deliver a fantastic event in 2022.
Thank you. I'm sure that you will. I'd like to now invite Tony Kelly to spend a couple of minutes just talking about yourself, Tony. That would be great. Thank you.
Thanks, Jennifer. My name is Tony Kelly, British born but raised in Jamaica, hence the Commonwealth aspect of it, and returned to England in 1979. So I've been back in this country, back in Birmingham, for the last 41 years with my family. So one knows Birmingham and the West Midlands inside out, okay? After early retirement, 30 years as an equality and diversity middle manager, I'm now in a voluntary role as a diabetes strategic patient partner for Birmingham and Solihull National Health Service, Birmingham and Solihull Clinical Commissioning Group. So I'm a diabetes ambassador, community advocate, going all over the country and nationally and internationally to give talks about health and well-being. And that's me in a nutshell.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Tony. Next, I'd like to invite Dr. Kevin Brown to say a few words.
Thank you, Jennifer, and good evening to everyone. Thanks for joining this very important event tonight. My name is Kevin Brown. I'm the National Chair of the Jamaican Diaspora UK. The Jamaican Diaspora UK is a national organization that simply aims to protect the interests of Jamaicans who live in the UK, but also to participate in nation building back home in Jamaica. We've been in existence for about 15 years now, and we get involved in all areas that affect the community, including health, education, business, and other social issues as well. I'm also the UK North representative on the Global Jamaica Diaspora Council, which is an advisory forum for the Jamaican government, and it's hosted and chaired by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade. And so, you know, I look forward to tonight's event. I've been involved in community activities for the last 20 years, and I'm hoping that tonight's event will give the community an opportunity to get involved in the games and to address any issues that they might have. Thank you, Jennifer.
Thank you, Kevin. Can I add at this point, though, although JDUK obviously Jamaica in the name gives it away. We are not just focused on Jamaicans this evening, and we hope that we've got all sorts of people in the audience enjoying this webinar. Phil Batty, are you still with us, Phil?
No, it's just Ian.
Okay, thank you. And before we go on, I'd like to offer apologies. We've received apologies from John Crabtree this evening. So I'd like that noted, and that John has given us his apologies. Okay, thank you. I'd like to direct this at the audience. Okay, so for those viewing on Facebook and on YouTube, we encourage and really welcome your participation. Please write your questions to the panel via YouTube and via Facebook, whichever means you're actually viewing this webinar. A member of our behind the scenes team, led very ably by Sophia Ramachan from JD UK, will let me have your comments and your questions, and I'll be able to pose those to the panel, to the appropriate panel, or to all the panel. Okay, have we got any questions from the panel at this point, or anything you want to say before we actually go into the event proper? Okay then, without further ado, what I'd like to do now is to offer Tony the floor.
Thanks, Jennifer. And you better time me, because I could talk for Britain, as some people know. So
all right.
Start timing. Right.
I will.
Okay, here we go. I remember on the 2nd of July this year, going onto Facebook and saw the headline from the Birmingham Mail, and the headline said, Brum Commonwealth Games diversity row with 19 of 20 leaders white. And they had the photographs of all of them, and stuck in the very middle was the one black man. We from Jamaica, from the Caribbean, would have said, one degga man, black man amongst all these white people. Having seen that on Facebook, I thought to myself, no, this can't be right. Apparently somebody pinched me and said, oh, Tony knew of this from ages ago. I'm afraid I didn't know of it, because had I known about it from 18 months or 2 years ago, when the organizing board was formed, I would have kicked up a rumpus or kicked up a fuss. So having found out on the 2nd of July, I put pen to paper along with Maureen Scott Douglas. I'm the secretary of the Jamaica Diaspora UK West Midlands region. And along with our chair, Maureen Scott Douglas, and Dr. Kevin Brown, our national chair, and Sophia Ramcharan, the national public relations officer, we put pen to paper and decided we're going to have to write to the John Crabtree, who has sent his apologies, who is the chair of the entire thing, to say exactly what is going on. And we asked some very soul-searching and very hard-hitting questions as to, is this fair? Is this, in this day and age, where, so we were being proactive in a sense and saying it's unjust, it's unfair, it's discriminatory, we've got to do something about it. We then also, having done that, we got the community involved. So we galvanized the community and got nearly 200 people from across the globe. And I'm glad you said, Jennifer, this is not a Jamaican thing, because a lot of stuff has come back to me. So why is Jamaica so in front of this? We decided, because we're Jamaican Diaspora UK, but people from Barbados, you name it, have signed the protest letter. So it's a global thing. And we sent that off with signatures from 3 MPs as well, and including the Jamaica High Commission and his supportive commissioners and ambassadors from the region as well. And this was sent off to John Crabtree to say, we're not happy. This doesn't show diversity, inclusion. Are we saying black people are in the 2nd tier? We can't be at the top of the table and so on. And since then, we need to bear in mind that 90% of the Commonwealth countries are people from African, Caribbean, or Asian background. I use the word black in a political sense. I personally don't like the word BAME, so I don't tend to use it. But black in a political sense. And when you think of Birmingham, the 2nd city in Britain, in a few years' time, black people will no longer be in the minority. We will be in the majority. So that too, and there are a lot of competent, efficient, very qualified people that I know who could easily have been asked to sit around the top tier, the top table. And that for me, what was very sad when we saw that happen. And we're about bringing change. And we need to mention 3 board members have left. One left in December 2019, the white board member. Dame Louise Martin, she did what I thought was a very honorable and decent thing. She realized what was happening, and she was appointed by the Games Federation. She decided to give up her seat to make way for somebody else. And a competent Black woman from Barbados, Sandra Osborne, who is a sports lawyer, took her place, okay? A third person, Jonathan Browning, resigned on the 6th of October, fairly recently, okay? And he was appointed, by the way, as a non-executive, independent non-executive member by the Cultural Secretary, Oliver Dowden. But within that same sphere, although we met with Ian earlier on, we were clearly told that there were other board members who would step down to make way for more African, Caribbean, Asian people to be on the main board. I don't think I've seen that happen yet. And those are questions that need to be asked. We were clearly told that there was going to be an head of equality, equity, inclusion, who also was going to be appointed. These things seem to be dragging on and on and on, the bureaucratic red tape, it's all taking time. We don't have the time. We're nearly Christmas now, let's face it. We only have 2021, the Games is 2022. There's a lot that needs to be done. With this other chap who has just resigned, that means there's 2 positions up for grabs. Apparently they have to go through all this bureaucratic red tape, and it has to go to the Oliver Dowden, and it has to be rubber stamped by the Prime Minister. And this is becoming a very long, drawn-out process. We've been speaking to Ian and others from July. We're now into October, going into November. And we were told back at the beginning of September, which is 2 months ago, that these positions, some of them would be filled. And we need questions answered in terms of lack of diversity, lack of inclusion. Black people are not any longer going to be seen as second best. We are competent, capable, and very good Black people out there. We put names forward, and I have known of people who have actually applied for positions to become members of the board. Nothing's happened. I have my ear to the ground. It's 41 years I've lived in Birmingham, so I know what's going on. I might not necessarily be around the table, but we hear what's going on. And something has to be done to make it more reflective, more diverse, more African, Caribbean, more Asian people in all spheres, not just at the top tier. We can go on to other things later on, but I'll just pause for now. And that's my earliest contribution. Thank you, Jennifer.
Okay, thank you very much, Tony.
Jennifer, if I could just add very briefly that, as Tony said, we did submit a letter to the Commonwealth Games Organizing Committee, and I must acknowledge that we did have a response from John Crabtree, the chairman, where he tried to outline how people were appointed and recruited to the organizing committee and the executive management board as well. So we have been having an ongoing dialogue between JDUK and the organizing committee, but hopefully this forum will give the public an opportunity to also participate in our conversation.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Kevin. Ian, I'd like to invite you to respond. I think that if you can set some context in addition to what Tony and Kevin have outlined, because obviously John Crabtree has responded, and I'd like you to focus, if you could, on the improvements that you've made or are planning to make.
Yeah, thanks, Jennifer, and thanks, Tony and Kevin. I'll maybe just start. You mentioned a couple of times John sent the it's not about avoiding meetings. John has school children of school age and currently in half term, so John's actually on annual leave this week, but is more than happy to engage on all these issues, as I think we're all aware going forward. So just to provide some clarity on that one. So let me start with some context on the board. But I'd like to start by saying up front, I'm not going to approach this in a defensive way. I think I've said to Tony and Kevin in the past that that we are very aware of the issues that they have raised. They are the right issues to have raised, and we need to make changes to address some of them. And I'll come on and talk to some of those as we go forward. And I'd also like to thank everyone in JD UK who has engaged with us and who has signed the letter and rightly raised their concerns and entered into dialogue. And so far, I think it's been constructive and helpful. So I'd just like to thank the group for all of that as well. But look, let's get on to specific issues. If I start with the board, I won't go into too much detail. Tony alluded to it briefly, but the board's not a simple appointment. And to be fair to John as chairman, he doesn't actually make any of the appointments. So just so viewers are aware, the board of the Commonwealth Games in Birmingham 2022 is made up of nominations from a variety of organisations and a smaller number of direct appointments from the Secretary of State. And again, not being defensive, that rightly so has resulted in a board that is not reflective of the region, and that's not where anybody wants to be in this space. And as I said, rightly, Tony and others have raised their concerns about that. Without making excuses, I think the issue there hasn't been one central overarching person to make sure that we had a board that was reflective of the region, and it's emerged out of a variety of, as I say, nominations and appointments, but it's an issue we need to address. So in addressing that board issue, Tony accurately reflected our conversations, where we are right now. And Tony, believe me, I share your concerns about the speed of some of these processes. I won't go into some of the bureaucracy that's around government appointments. It's not something that's specific to the Commonwealth Games. I might add, if anyone has been involved in the process to be appointed to any UK public body, it is a very lengthy process. But where we are as of today, rightly, Dame Louise Martin stood down, as Tony highlighted, and was replaced by Sandra Osborne. Derek Anderson's on the board, but also we did commit to making further changes. One of those has been confirmed to me in writing today. Unfortunately, I can't share it tonight until it's rightfully announced, but it does give me the ability to say that one of the other organisations will be replacing one of their nominations. I am confident in the two vacancies that are there that we will be better represented through the appointments made in those. Neither of those are complete. I have been privy to a shortlist on one of them. The second process has just started because it's been a recent resignation. So that does give me confidence in, Tony, that we will move to a board that's certainly better in terms of reflectiveness than it was. I'm not saying it's going to be perfect, but we are making those changes. But I do agree with you, it would have been great to make them in a quicker way. In terms of wider issues around the organising committee and what we have done, and I was going to say in reaction to the article in July, that's not fair to some of our staff who have been involved in discussions on EDI within the business. And also we set up a group of staff members in response to the horrific incidents in Minneapolis and the George Floyd murder and the Black Lives Matter movement, who were considering a number of challenges to the business in advance of that article in July. But what that did put in train those initial discussions with staff group members and also some discussions with organisations like your own, has been an extensive thought process across all of this. We are appointing a head of EDIs, Tony flagged. That one has moved relatively quickly. In fact, the second stage interviews were on Monday. Tony, you will appreciate we do need to give those processes time to make sure we do get the right level of responses from across the region, and therefore we don't want to rush it. We're much more focused on making sure we get the right person into that role. So we have tried to move it as quickly as possible, but also making sure that we run a process that would stand up to scrutiny. So again,
sorry, EDI, some people listening, public meeting, might not know what EDI is. Others do, but some don't.
Yeah, so this is Head of Equality, Diversity and Inclusion within the organising committee. So that will be an individual who will be responsible organisational wide to make sure that the organisation's culture is exactly in line with those three words that I've just outlined, but also that we'll be enforcing that culture across all the organisational functions who are involved in the likes of recruitment, the volunteering programme, the cultural programme, etc. And also we'll be liaising closely with our engagement team to make sure that all communities across the region are aware of the opportunities. So that person will start shortly. The board's given clear direction in terms of they want an action plan put in place very quickly, but have gone further and actually given clear direction on the 5 principles that they want to be followed in relation to that. Just to quickly summarise those, firstly, we need to develop a workforce that's reflective of the West Midlands. And Tony's right, not just at board level, but across the employees of the organising committee. Sorry, I'm in a light timer here. Not just the employees of the organising committee, but the volunteer workforce, the contractor workforce, the ceremonies workforce, etc., etc. Secondly, giving a clear steer that we want to deliver a fully accessible and inclusive game. So that's clearly a big focus on accessibility in terms of being a disability confident employer and making sure the games are physically as accessible as possible, but also making sure that in everything we do, there's no barriers to becoming involved in the games, whether that's physical or even financial. So making sure that we have the appropriate strategies in place for ticketing, cast recruitment, etc., to make sure everybody can be involved. We want to make sure that we create, thirdly, a fair, supportive and open culture throughout the games delivery. So we have engaged with an organisation called Leaders in Diversity. We're working through that now. There's been extensive training given to all the staff, and we're in the lucky position in that we are a relatively new organisation, so we can develop a culture here. There are still over 1,000 roles to be recruited, and we want to make sure that we embed a positive culture right across the organisation. Fourth one, we want to make sure that we can connect communities to the games through engagement and participation. So that again is making sure that we reach out with all those opportunities right across all communities in the West Midlands. And as part of that, whilst I've mentioned we're recruiting a head of EDI, we've also recently appointed a chief engagement manager, or sorry, lead engagement manager, and there will be another 3 members of that team coming on shortly as well. And their specific roles will be to engage right across the region, making sure that everyone's aware of how they can get involved in the games. And then finally, and I think this links to one of the questions that I saw flash up earlier, a real focus on educating and developing our shared understanding on issues of inequality. And in particular, that will look at the learning programme and the history of the Commonwealth, the legacy of colonialism, and having very open and honest conversations right across the learning programme, in particular focused on work with schools there, but also a focus through the games on educating young people in anti-racism and tackling discrimination and improving equality in sport. Now, those are all big 5 aspirational pillars. And obviously the next question is, well, how are you going to do that? And that's the focus now. So to address your concern, Tony, about this taking a long time to get this head of EDI on, we've also recruited, and they are on board and working with us now, a specialist ED&I consultancy firm, and they are working through this action plan as we speak, and we'll be doing a handover with the head of EDI to make sure we have lost time in developing that. So we do hope to roll that out in the near future. So I'm just conscious of time. We'll maybe pause there, Jennifer. I think we're probably in line with your timescales at that point.
Before you move on, Ian, can I, and perhaps these will come up in the questions, but just a couple from me. In terms of the head of Equalities, Diversity and Inclusion, can you confirm that that post reports to you as the CEO?
It does, yes.
And did you consider that important? And can you tell us why?
That's principally the reason it does report to me. I'm personally invested in addressing a number of the areas that I've just outlined. Hopefully you'd agree, you're not shied away from this issue. I want to make sure the business has it at front of mind. I think we'll come on and talk later on about job opportunities, recruitment practices, training programs, etc. All of that. We're doing a huge amount of work in, and I'm personally invested in making sure we deliver that, and personally can be held accountable for it. So I want to work closely with the new head of EDI to make sure I am fully across everything that they are doing. But also I think rightly so, it sends a signal to the rest of our business if they're reporting directly to me of the importance of this as a function in the business.
Okay, just one other thing. I know that in the letter that was originally sent to the chair of the board, the mention of the term cultural competence was quite prominent in that letter from Tony and from Maureen Scott Douglas and from Kevin. And you mentioned that you have an opportunity to really direct the culture of the organisation. And I wondered, what role do you think cultural competence plays in how you develop that culture of the organisation?
Yeah, I think that's a good question, and one that we, you know, we are kind of addressing through education. I think, Jennifer, you know, we've challenged ourselves as a business over the last couple of months around you know, our own makeup and our own knowledge and our own experiences, and we've engaged with a couple of bodies, one who have taken the full leadership team in the business and the recruiting managers through, for example, unconscious bias training to challenge themselves on that. Our recruitment processes have now changed quite significantly in terms of, and actually a lot of that came through challenge from our internal group as well, around making sure that interview panels got appropriate representation, and we're approaching it in a way that we're challenging ourselves in terms of our cultural thinking and our potential endemic biases as well. So but that if it starts now and gets embedded now, then everyone who comes into the organisation will work and hopefully understand that within the business, and that will help develop the culture as we grow as well.
Okay, thank you. Before I move on to the next important part for you, Ian, have any of the panelists got anything to add to to Ian's responses before we talk about the big opportunities for business people, jobs, etc.? Okay, can I invite you then, Ian, to speak about the opportunities and how we go about accessing those opportunities, and where we can look and how you can make sure that the opportunities actually materialise?
Yeah, so maybe just take a few minutes to outline what those opportunities are. So we have around 1,300 or so job opportunities within the organising committee. We're currently around 200 or so staff, so still 1,100 jobs. If you go onto our website right now, you'll see, I think, 28 or so advertised jobs, 3 apprenticeships advertised, and that will continue to grow for the next 18 months or so. On top of that, we've got a significant supply chain starting to come on through our procurement process with the games. They will be significant employers as well in job-related activity. Most of their jobs probably shorter term and closer to the games themselves, but potentially tens of thousands of roles with those organisations right across the various delivery functions, from catering, technology, logistics, waste roles, security man-guarding roles. So there's huge opportunities as we get closer to the event. There's 12 or so thousand volunteer opportunities required for the event as well. And then, as you mentioned, businesses, there's about 300 million or so business contracts to be related to the games as well. So that's a kind of field. And then if I lay on top of that, the cultural programme, which we'll talk about later, mass cast opportunities for ceremonies, ability to get involved with the Queen's Baton. Really, there genuinely are tens and tens of thousands of opportunities to be getting involved in the games. And of course, hugely important to us that, as we've just discussed, those opportunities, we reach out as far and wide to make sure people can access those. So in relation to doing that, if anyone's watching this who's interested, all our roles are advertised on the Birmingham2022.com website, so they can go there. I think there's a Get Involved section, and that takes us actually through to a new job portal. And there's a huge amount of detail on there about each of the current roles and roles that are coming up. I think there's also a map on the WAME website about how you can get involved in the volunteering programme. And as I said earlier, we have now moved that recruitment process, I would say, into a much better place in terms of reaching further out and making sure that we can access all communities. So I mentioned some of the training in the recruitment process. We've also, in terms of the assets we're using, we are using a whole range now of diverse job board utilisation. So that's not just in relation to, I don't think you wanted me to use the term BAME, Tony, so maybe black in a political sense, job boards, but also LGBT, disability job boards, to make sure that they're all available. But I think the real power is going to be in this engagement team, if I'm being honest, and getting people from the organising committee to get out, boots on the ground, effectively, old style, being trusted by communities, and constantly communicating both verbally and through either the written word or through social media with those communities, so that they're fully aware of how they get involved and they've got someone they trust who will make sure that they convert some of that engagement into real opportunity and real jobs for people. The process.
Before you move on, Ian, sorry, I think, Tony, did you want to come in at this point? Or was that a mistake? Maybe it was just a blip in the system.
No, I didn't want to come in. I didn't want to interrupt Ian. No.
Sorry, Ian, if you'd like to continue.
That's okay. And then, and back to that bias point, we're very conscious of in the process making sure that all applications and through the shortlisting process and everything else are fully anonymised, and there's no bias in relation to how those CVs and applications are assessed. So I think we are getting better in terms of, I'm now very committed to monitoring the breakdown of our workforce. It is not yet at a level that is reflective of the West Midlands, but it is much better than it was. So probably when if we even go back 7 or 8 months, our split of workforce that are black in the political sense compared with the balance of workforce is significantly higher than it was, and it's probably only 4 or 5% of the ethnicity split that's within the West Midlands, and I've got a desire to make sure that we do that, and I've committed, I think, previously to JD UK and others, that one of the first things I'll be asking the head of ED&I to do is put in place a dashboard that we will put up regularly on our website so everyone can monitor the breakdown of the organising committee's workforce, not just by ethnicity, actually by whether it's gender, sexuality, or any other protected characteristics. We'll be very open about doing that, because I think that will help us as a business as well, make sure we focus our resources and our recruitment processes that way. Volunteering, I quickly come on to that one. We have recently finalised actually the Games volunteering strategy. It won't surprise you to know that a big focus on making sure the vast majority of that workforce comes from the region. And we will be working with all the local authorities in the region to make sure that we get applications from right across the West Midlands. And those roles, again, some of them are quite specialist in relation to perhaps some medical roles or sport-related roles. Others are much more general. We're looking for drivers or those that are involved in stewarding or wayfinding, etc. So again, huge number of opportunities, and there is no reason, and rightly we should be challenged if that volunteer workforce does not reflect the region that we all live in. So again, that will be a huge focus for us. And we'll come on later on, I think, to talk about the opportunities within the cultural sector. But in relation to businesses then, if I just briefly talk about businesses. So again, firstly, I should say on our website, there is a business portal. So any business can go on there, can register their interest in the Games, tick the sector that they're interested in, and any opportunities will be flagged to them. However, we do understand there are perhaps some smaller and medium enterprise businesses who perhaps aren't used to some of the public sector tendering processes. Our hands are tied a little bit by the fact that we are a public body, and therefore we do need to follow those rules.
Yeah.
That said, we are trying our best, working in particular in partnership with some of the chambers of commerce, to try and provide learning support to smaller and medium enterprises So they can tender for games business, but actually just as importantly, they can tender for public sector opportunities long after we're gone as well. So we recently worked on a scheme with the Greater Birmingham Chamber of Commerce and with Joe Blake in the city, who's now the chair of the Commonwealth Chamber, around in particular focusing on black businesses and making sure that they are ready for some of the opportunities that are coming through the tender programme. We cannot make commitments to specifically award any business games work. It has to be through that procurement process. But what we can do is try our best to make sure everyone has the opportunity to compete for that work. So I'll draw breath again there, Jennifer. Hopefully that's a quick roundup of some of the opportunities that the Games is bringing.
Thank you very much, Ian. Before we move off that subject of opportunities, can I pull Kevin in, who has a question?
Hi, Ian. Yeah, thanks for giving us an update on, firstly, what actions you've taken since our letter and campaign for greater diversity in the organisation. We are happy to see how much you've engaged with the issue and have tried to sort of improve diversity and inclusion across the organisation. Clearly, there's more work to be done, but we welcome your efforts so far. My question was around the recruitment process. I wanted to understand, how are you going to advertise the jobs? Is it going to be purely through your website, or are you going to engage with media outlets that are ethnic based in across the various ethnic communities, so as to ensure that the jobs are advertised across various communities, and thereby making people aware of these opportunities as they emerge?
Yeah, there's a couple of things there. So firstly, yes, every job will be advertised on the website, but as I think I mentioned earlier, we have now activated a number of job boards. But I think the most effective route to address the question, Kevin, is that we have now got a significant database of what we would probably view as more sort of community or faith leaders from right across the region, and we are regularly now sending them on, I think, on a monthly basis, the rolling job opportunities, and asking them through their own networks to cascade right across the region. And actually that, I think, is proving more effective than perhaps some of the more traditional methods. We also, just for clarity, the organising committee doesn't do all of this itself, so it does have a recruitment partner who are incredibly experienced about recruitment, but also in relation to making sure that they reach out as far as possible across the region. So they have a variety of different advertising routes, and yeah, we can definitely utilise those as well. But I think that the more informal network is probably proving the most effective.
Thank you. Ian, you mentioned recruitment partners. How are you able to ensure, and it's obvious that you will need recruitment partners because the recruitment process for such an enormous event is massive. How are you ensuring that your recruitment partners are recruiting to the levels that you would wish yourself to see? How are you able to do that?
Yeah, we've got it's one partner, Jennifer, that works with us, a company called the GI Group, and as you would expect, there is a contract in place around KPIs and other measures that they have to deliver against. And look, they are a very, very good organisation. We've got a strong relationship with them. They constantly ask for feedback. They're constantly trying to improve. What I would say to people who do apply for jobs, one of the challenges we've got, and I'm just being completely honest tonight, is that not unsurprisingly, with economic conditions, the appetite for jobs with the Games is huge. So for jobs that I've advertised, it's not surprising to see 800, 900 or up to 1,000 applications for individual roles. We try our best to engage on a level with everybody, but inevitably when you're dealing with that number for each role, and then, as I said, at the moment 28 roles are advertised, there is a shortlisting process, and some people do get a more generic and automated response. But I just wanted to put that out there because there is huge demand, but we are trying to make sure that we do engage with everybody as best we can.
Okay, thank you. Before we move on to the next section around the cultural festival, I'd like to give Tony an opportunity to come in and ask you a question. Ian, please.
Yes. You mentioned the Commonwealth Games 22 website. Now, not everybody is au fait or familiar or wanting to go. I'm going to give you the names of 5 British publications where we need to put our money where our mouth is, where we need to advertise. These are papers that Black, African, Caribbean, and Asian people read. And I read them. I don't see any adverts in there about the Commonwealth Games. I'll name them. The Voice newspaper, the Jamaica Weekly Gleaner, the Phoenix newspaper, the Asian Times, the African Times. Those are read by people from the backgrounds we're talking about, in a sense. And you have Chinese publications as well. Now, you need to start saying, okay, because you mentioned about 300 million pounds, I wrote that down straight away. You need to put adverts and on New Style Radio and other African radio programs that are out there. So people are able, the communities that you're trying to aim and reach, they're actually seeing these things and saying, hey, because the average Joe Blogs or Mary Smith is not going to go to the Commonwealth Games website. It's a very narrowed approach. You need to think wider than that and try and embrace the community more by going to places and publications that they do read. That's very important. And it's about putting your money where your mouth is.
Yeah, no, look, Tony, that's a fair challenge. I mean, I wouldn't want to be perceived on here this evening that we ignore those publications or that radio station that you mentioned. We have engaged with them. In fact, the Phoenix regularly run stories and other things on the games generally. Are we at the moment
adverts?
No, are we? I was going to say, are we at the moment advertising on those publications? No, we are not. But I take that away and give that some consideration and speak to the team around that. I think that's a fair challenge, and let me see what the feedback is on that one.
Okay, thanks for that very practical suggestion, Tony. Can we move on to learn a little bit more, and I'm really interested in this, about the cultural festival. And can I keep you to a little bit of time here, please, Ian, so that we can get some questions from the wider audience. So we run a little bit over, so can you take about 5-7 minutes for this?
We can, yep. So just a quick overview of that. So firstly, cultural programme for Commonwealth Games. Current plan is that will run for around 6 months or so, probably from between March through to September 2022. We would love to hear anyone tonight from any creatives, artists, and any organisations about ideas for the festival. It's still being in development. So there is an email address, culture@birmingham2022.com. Please drop the team a note on any of that. And early next year, we'll be opening a £2 million Creative Communities Grant programme. That will be in partnership with Birmingham City Council, and that will give a lot of opportunity for any cultural organisations right across Birmingham City Council's catchment area, the opportunity to access some of that significant grant funding. So that's one, again, to take away this evening. We do recognise in relation to this discussion this evening that we have an opportunity to develop the sector with this Games, and also engage with Black artists and the Black creative community as well, which I know is a focus for this evening. So we are putting together a few programmes. If my colleague Phil, who I know is listening, was on tonight, he would be able to articulate those much better than I. But those are around capacity building and skills initiatives, benefiting cultural community leaders so that there's a legacy there after the Games as well, but also a specific programme around diverse artists and freelance professionals. So there will be a focus and there will be money channelled into Black artists as a result of the cultural programme. But look, it's a huge opportunity, and it will definitely, and just to give you a sense of scale, I think there'll be 200 or so artistic commissions, investing in over 550 world-class artists and creative practitioners from right across the region. The programme expects to engage with about 2.5 million people. It's going to create up to 150 opportunities for grassroots Birmingham organisations to deliver creative community projects. There'll be a big focus on youth as well, a big under-30s focus, and a large focus on channeling the money, the Birmingham money that I mentioned earlier, to the city's 25 most deprived wards. So there really is a push there to make sure that money can help change lives. And then in terms of what I mentioned earlier, the desire is there to create over 5,000 or so life-enhancing opportunities for mass cast participation and performance from the West Midlands in those opening and closing ceremonies as well. And then, of course, we're going to have a huge live site programme, so right across the region, and running alongside Games Time, there will be big live sites that are both showing sport but also putting on a significant number of roadshows right across the West Midlands. And I think we've got the opportunity to engage with about 500,000 people in putting all of those live sites on as well. And most of that cultural programme content should be free at point of access, so no barriers there. We might have tickets in relation to health and safety, but they will be free of charge. So again, I'll draw breath, but as you can see, a project and programme of scale with significant opportunity there as well.
Thank you very much. I'd like now to, unless you have anything else to add, or any other panelists would like to add anything before we move on to our audience questions.
I'd like to just very quickly, from a cultural perspective, mention when they came initially to start talking about the cultural extravaganza, because I've been involved in and going to meetings like that. Carol Pemberton is the leader of Black Voices. And there are people who are on Ian's group at the senior level who had never even heard of Black Voices, the well-known Birmingham-based a cappella group, well-known in Birmingham, well-known in Europe, well-known in Africa. And those 5 women who sing within that group, their parents come from the Caribbean. So that in itself shows you how much more homework and groundwork and community-based work needs to be done by all these people who seem to have been parachuted in. Because if you don't even know about Black Voices, a cappella, in terms of what they do, and they've been around for 20 odd years, that in itself tells you, and one just hopes going forward, there's several other people out there, I won't mention any names, who are equally competent, good artists, performers, etc., within the West Midlands, not just Birmingham, who need to be tapped in and used, and not parachuting people from London and South Africa and further afield. That's very important as well. And the youth, as you rightly said.
Yeah, I don't think, Tony, the desire at all is to parachute the majority of artists in from further afield. Hopefully you've heard this evening that this is about a West Midlands focused cultural programme. So so hopefully that should allay your concerns there, and you can rightly hold us to account on that. But I know the team working on this, that is where all their engagement and focus is.
Thank you. I think those are some important practical points from Tony, but this is not just a Birmingham's game, it is an international event. So I think that surely that's part of the consideration too. But thank you, Tony. Practical as usual. Thank you very much. We have some questions coming through now. So I'd like to move to the questions stage, if that's okay with everyone. And the first one I'd like to offer, I'll read the questions anyway, they're primarily to Ian. You may find once I've read the questions that you've answered the question. Not sure how we might deal with that, but let me ask them and then we'll go from there. Is that okay? So from Troy Richards, yes, Mr. Reid. Very, very polite. We are not just thinking about employment, we are thinking about creating opportunities and leaving a legacy for our children. How are you planning on doing this? So we're talking about legacy. And if I would ask you to think about not just legacy from these games, but the legacy from previous games and how you've been able to incorporate those legacies into Birmingham 2022.
Yeah, so I think the first thing to say is maybe just talk a little bit about the governance around this. So the most important thing, which I think is rightly highlighted in the question, is that the organising committee in which I leave, which dissolves 9-12 months after the games, doesn't just finish and that's the end of any benefits that arise from the Commonwealth Games. And there's a big focus right from the leader of the City Council to the Mayor and up to DCMS that that's not the case. So there is an individual, what we call lab committee, so the legacy and benefits governance that's focused specifically on that. It has some of the civic leaders on there, but it also has individuals who were recruited to join that committee. Some of who have got an educational background, so it's a focus on children. Others who have got cultural backgrounds, so a focus on making sure that the cultural programme leaves a lasting legacy and infrastructure as well. And that committee also has a huge number of work streams focused on various areas where we believe we can leave the most effective legacy. So that's areas like health and well-being, trade, tourism and investment, sustainability, culture, as we've mentioned, accessibility. So they've got specialists working on each of those as well. So there's a variety of funding sources going into those, but there are a number of those work streams that I am confident, long after the games is finished, the investment is behind them and they will continue to leave that legacy. I mean, the specific legacies from the games themselves, it's easy to talk about the infrastructure and the sporting venues, but actually it's the softer stuff around the inspiring and making sure that those people, the young children in particular who are watching the Commonwealth Games and are inspired, have the ability and access to the clubs and the resources and the support they need to go and take up sport if they're inspired to do so. Exactly the same in the cultural side, that there is a cultural infrastructure that's funded and supported that allows people who maybe have been inspired or may have engaged in the ceremonies to go and continue that engagement long after. This, we've got huge aspirations in the sustainability space for the games. The games should be a catalyst to make the city and the region a much lower carbon economy and a much cleaner place to live, with much better maintained outdoor space. All of those things are being worked on, and I could go on and on. So I am confident that we will get there with that, but it will need community support as well. It's not just, this will not just be achieved by a few leaders and local authorities spread around the region. We will need communities to engage, and we've got a third sector programme. Some of you may have seen it, called United by 2022, and it's focused on engaging the third and voluntary sector, who have great ideas about projects that help deliver some of those legacy ambitions and visions for the games. They work closely with us. They can use our assets and IP, and they're doing great work already and will continue to do so. So I am very confident that there will be a fabulous legacy from these games. And to answer your last question, Jennifer, about looking back at previous games, I think they have done reasonably well, but the big advantage we have here is that we've learned lessons about what has worked well and what hasn't worked well in the legacy space from previous events. And for example, it's always a challenge to improve the health and well-being statistics around multi-sport events, but actually some of the learning from previous events is if you build out the infrastructure and the club networks and you put the facilities in place early, then there's more chance of doing that. So there's great programs going on right now. For example, 3-on-3 basketball and wheelchair basketball is on our program, and we're working closely with partner bodies around infrastructure across the region to make sure that the games leaves a legacy of on the street, on the ground level facilities for 3-on-3 basketball. And if you start thinking about that now, then they're the ones that I think can get some real wins. So lots of work going on there, but if the listener would like any more information, then they should drop us a note and we can follow up with that.
Okay, thank you. That was also a question from Ian McIntosh, actually, about the lasting legacies from previous events. So thank you for that. We're getting a few questions that I believe have been answered, but I'll ask them anyway in case you want to add more. We have a couple of questions from Denise Richards. The first one is that she still wants Ian to tell us, did he not recognise the issue with the diversity of the committee? What has changed to ensure that the committee is reflective of changes? I believe that you've answered that. Is there anything you'd like to add at this point?
It's a fair challenge. I mean, I think, you know, I'm not going to sidestep this personally. I think, yeah, we should have dealt with the issues that you have all raised earlier. I think that's a fair challenge, and I think we are putting in place the changes now that need to be done. But yeah, I think it was incumbent on a number of us, including myself in that, to be more vocal perhaps earlier. Yeah, it's a fair challenge from Denise.
Okay, another one from Denise, and this speaks a little bit, you've talked about the board and what actions have been taken to address the lack of representation at board level and at committee level. Denise is asking about, apart from these committees, are you confident in terms of how many Black people are currently involved in the planning work, perhaps at middle manager level, and some of the other disciplines around making these games happen?
Yeah, that's kind of the answer I gave earlier. Am I happy yet? No, because it's not. My desire is to make the ethnicity breakdown of the organised committee reflective of the region, and we're not quite there yet. So I am not happy yet. Am I happy on the trajectory? Yes. I mean, to be blatantly honest, I think the West Midlands at the moment has around about 25% of the population are from Black in the political sense, as Tony said. Ethnicity, we are at about 20% as an organisation. So there is more to do. And that's why we've put in place some of that infrastructure to help us do that. But we're not where we need to be yet, no.
I must admit, Ian, I did think that the, I'll use the term BAME population in the West Midlands, especially Birmingham, was much higher than 20. I thought it was...
In Birmingham, it's higher. It is
Yeah.
absolutely higher, and Tony's right to flag that. The West Midlands, it's difficult to get the right data, actually, Jennifer. The last official data, I think, is from the 2011 census, which is clearly lower than it is now.
Yeah.
And I think it's actually, for the West Midlands, is less than 20%. But we accessed a couple of university data sets, and we think it's about 25, 26% based on the latest information.
Across the region, yeah.
Across the West Midlands. But you're right, Birmingham is significantly higher. Our funding comes from across the West Midlands, and the games is taking place across the West Midlands, which is why we're using that benchmark. If we exceed it and we get near Birmingham stats, great, but that is our desire, is to make sure that the workforce reflects the geographic footprint of the games.
Okay, thank you. A question from a D Toppin. I don't know whether that's a male or female, but his or her question is, my concern is transparency of process. And I think you mentioned this, but if you can repeat, who is the advertising partner? And if BCC has a strong relationship with them, this does not fill me with confidence at all. I think this person is actually not confident in the relationship that you have with your recruitment partner.
So just for clarity, we are not BCC, so we are not a part of Birmingham City Council, if that's the question. We are an arm's length body actually to DCMS, central government. So we have no formal governance link to BCC, although, as you would imagine, work very closely in partnership with them. The recruitment partner is a private company called the GI Group, who operate nationwide but have a strong presence in the West Midlands and a strong track record of recruitment in the region. But I'm not sure what if they do any work for BCC or not, but if that helps answer the question, that there is a clear distinction there.
Yeah, and they do mention BCC, but I understand the question. The questions are coming in thick and fast now. I'd like to offer a question from Errol Drummond, who's one of our active business people in the region and also a member of JD UK. Would you be able to tell us how many Black companies and businesses have successfully bid for infrastructure projects? Is that something that you can pull out?
Two issues there. One, we and this is the intricacies of games management. The organising committee that I work for does not build things permanently. So we are not the body that's building the Alexander Stadium and the new stand there, nor the Sandwell Aquatic Centre. Both the contracting bodies for those are Birmingham City Council in respect of Alexander Stadium and Sandwell Metropolitan Borough Council in relation to the Aquatic Centre. So we don't tend to have many infrastructure projects. The main reason for that, just to clarify for listeners, is simply that we are a special purpose vehicle. So these venues are being built not just for the games, but to be operated long after the games and owned therefore by those organisations. We kind of rent them for the event itself. So we don't really have many infrastructure opportunities to answer that question. The second part of the question, I suppose, is how much opportunity, how many games opportunities are going to Black businesses. That's one I can take away. I don't have any data to hand for this evening, but if we can get Errol's contact details, I'm happy to try and get back to him if it's a more general question about.
I think that would be a good supplementary question to Errol. So if you can get the answer to that, and we'll make sure that you're able to communicate that response, not just to Errol, but to everybody really. I think that would be really important.
Let me follow up on that one, Jennifer, and can see if we can get to that.
Okay, I'd like to change the vibe a little bit because of a question that we've had, and it's quite a complicated question. I'm sure you, in terms of reading it out, not necessarily in terms of how you respond to it. So bear with me while I read this question that has come in earlier, which changes the direction a little bit of the questioning that we've had so far. So here we go. Why are we halfway from the Gold Coast to the Birmingham event with a reconciliation action plan yet to be announced? Why is it difficult to think about truth and reconciliation in terms of not only the Indigenous people and the colonists, but also the people racialised as white British and people racialised as other than white British? Why is it difficult to transfer that?
Yeah, so just to give other viewers some context, so in the Gold Coast, there was a significant reconciliation plan with the Aboriginal population, of which the white population obviously took their land a couple hundred years ago in the context of Australia. And I think there was a lot of work done in that space. I think that's what's being referred to here, and pulling the analogy through to Birmingham and colonialism. So fully understand the question. My understanding is this: the CGF, the Commonwealth Games Federation, are already engaging on this issue and are working with us in relation to this as a platform. I think what I mentioned earlier was one of our key pillars in this is the learning programme, and actually not shying away from, I think, the issue that's been highlighted here, but actually making it a key pillar of our learning programme is that we actually go around every school in the West Midlands, or as many as we can, and have the open and honest conversations about the history of empire, the flow through to the Commonwealth, all the bad, good and other issues associated with that. And the modern Commonwealth is a strong family of nations, but we all know about some of the horrific practices that took place in terms of the history of the empire as well. So that may address some of those challenges. I'm not sure the question is we should also have a formal plan similar to the Gold Coast, but I can certainly pick that up with the CGF in terms of progress. But certainly we as the organising committee, through that learning programme, I think will be having similar discussions to which the Gold Coast had through their Aboriginal reconciliation programme.
Yeah. Thank you for that, and I'm sure that we probably need to delve into that in terms of the plan a little bit more. We're coming to the end of our time, but I do have one, not a question, but a comment from King's Dog King or King's Dog. I'm not sure. Apologies to the audience member for me not being clear on your name there. The Commonwealth membership is made up of over 80% BAME countries, we should be reflecting that in the representation of the Games and administration. And it's a statement, really, and I think you can concur that that is.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just, I don't disagree with that. I think my only clarification to that would be, I think it's more important that the city and region that are organising the Games is reflected in the governance and the workforce. And you would find that actually in whatever Commonwealth country was hosting the Games, because this is a Games where we're having every Commonwealth country visit us, and it needs to be owned and it needs to be a Games that showcases the best of Birmingham and the West Midlands, and the best way to do that is to have it delivered by the people of Birmingham and the West Midlands, and welcome the Commonwealth to the region. So, but the overarching principal point, I think, is the one we focused on, which is where we started this conversation, and Tony's points around clearly the board was not meeting the criteria of either of those examples. So, and hopefully we've explained the journey we're on to try and address some of that this evening.
Okay, I've got one question that I missed from Eshi Escoffery. I'm terrible at these names, I do apologise. But again, I think it's covered. And what changes are being made to include people of colour as Commonwealth executives to give a more diverse reflection of the city's vision? I feel that's been answered. I'm not sure whether Eshi missed the response, but I think that Ian has outlined the plan that they have. So I don't necessarily think that you need to go back to that. I'm just checking to see if we have any more questions, Ian, for you or any other member of the panel. Members of the panel, is there anything you'd like to say at this point? We could go on a little bit longer, but we have committed to Ian to 8:15. And we're kind of, are we at that point now? Yeah, we're 2 minutes off. Any last things you'd like to say, Ian? Because I haven't got any more questions coming through at the minute.
Yeah, look, just final comments from me. Thank you. Firstly, to reiterate my thanks to everyone for engaging on the topic. I know it's your evening. It's hugely important to us to get this right. So the more feedback we get, then that's helpful. We're not going to shy away. I don't think JD UK or others are going to let us anyway.
No.
and rightly so. So we're open to that challenge. And if there are any other questions that people feel haven't been addressed tonight or other concerns, then please get in touch and let us know.
Yeah, I think that Tony and Kevin and Warren Scott Douglas have kicked off an engagement with you. And I'd like to see that continue, and I'm sure you're committed to that. So hopefully this won't be the last of some events, not necessarily in this format or this forum, but I'm sure that relationship will continue as we move forward into the date of the actual Games. Tony, any last minute comments you'd like to make?
Yes, you did. Thanks, Jennifer. For me, I'll just say the proof of the pudding is in the eating. And for me, actions speak louder than words. I'm not going to end up saying, and don't take this badly, that talk is cheap. I want to see positive, affirmative, proactive things happening, visible, so people can say, yes, yes. So it's the smarter, the specific, the measurable, the achievable, the realistic, the time limited, and then I'll add anti-discriminatory at the end of that. That's what I'm about. And we have a well-known Jamaican saying, "Pichiri in a drunker back." Well, we at JDUK and others who want to come on board are going to hold them accountable because we are part and parcel of this. Ian, you might not know Pichiri in a drunker back. Someone will explain that to you
do
afterwards.
You never
I don't know. No, I don't.
You have to explain it, Tony.
Ask one of your black colleagues at work to explain Pichiri in a drunker back.
No, that's a very Jamaican saying, Tony, so you might have to help us out.
I've written it down, Tony.
That's me finished.
I don't know even if I could write that phraseology, so good luck on that one, Ian.
I didn't say I'd spelt it right, Jennifer. I said
you've got the phonics and the vibe, I guess. Kevin, is there a last minute things you'd like to share, please?
Yeah, just in closing, first of all, I'd just like to thank Ian for agreeing to come on here, and to field all the questions that we've put to him, and we've appreciated his sort of honest approach in answering the questions, and sort of accepting that more needs to be done. The reality is that the Commonwealth Games are being held in a super diverse city called Birmingham. And so, we would like to see that diversity reflected within the organizing committee. And I think, it's fair to say that Ian gets it. And as Tony said, it's now for the organizing committee to prove to us that they will take the necessary steps to ensure that we see a level of diversity in the organizing of the games, because we know that the participants are already going to be diverse. The Commonwealth Games Federation is made up of over 70 nations. So it is only right that the organizers of the games also reflect a level of diversity. So we look forward to continuing this conversation with Ian and continuing to work with Ian in terms of the practical steps around ensuring that the jobs are advertised across a wide range of communities, and in terms of volunteers as well, recruiting volunteers that are from a diverse range of communities, and also, ensuring that small and medium-sized businesses are engaged and are provided with the necessary support. Because oftentimes what happens is that when you have big events like the Commonwealth Games, they initially try to engage small and medium-sized businesses and then set the bar so high in terms of the requirements that they unfortunately force out a lot of these small businesses. So I hope that Ian will look at how can you engage with small businesses, how can you improve their capacity through training and perhaps being flexible with some of the criteria where possible, so that everyone can feel that it's their game. The games belongs to them. So I just wanted to thank everyone on the team, everyone in the campaign team on the JDUK side, and to thank the Commonwealth Games for engaging with us, because when we wrote to John Crabtree, I must say that we were quite firstly impressed with the speed of response. We got a response quite quickly from John Crabtree, and then we had a follow-up meeting with yourself, Ian, and now we've had this public meeting. So it's not just about complaining, but we also want to express our appreciation where we've seen that you've taken positive steps to engage, and we look forward to working with you, because what I can assure you, Ian, is that we want the games to succeed, and we're here to help. We're not just here to complain. So, good luck with the games, and, we'll be right there next to you, cheering on the athletes in 2022. And thank you very much, Jennifer. You've been a brilliant host.
Thank you. Just the last bit from me. I'd like to commit to Ian that I will speak to Tony to decipher his quote and get that to you, because I'd like to know as well. And my parents are from Jamaica, and I feel a bit ashamed that I have no idea what he said. So that's something I'll commit to.
Thank you.
I'll just no problem. I'll give the last vote of thanks. Thanks, Kevin. To Ian Reid, who was our main speaker tonight. Thank you for your time. Tony Kelly, not only for tonight, but for leading on the campaign to address the shortfalls as we've seen tonight. Kevin, for just being Kevin, and for his role in the campaign and in JDUK. Maureen Scott Douglas, who's the chair of the West Midlands, who isn't here tonight, but was also key in getting the campaign off the ground. The lead behind the scenes, and you can never forget the people behind the scenes who make things happen, and that's Sophia Ramachan from the JDUK. And last but definitely not least, no, there's two, not the last, I almost forgot the hundreds of people who actually backed the campaign with their signatures. I think that's really, really important that we thank them. And then last but not least, the audience who are here this evening. Thank you very much. And on that note, we will conclude. Thank you. Bye, everyone.